Welcome, everybody. Today we're talking with Jake, who was once a door-to-door cable salesman. He likes to be out of character and can sound like Scooby-doo. He loves huckleberry fudge ice cream, collects videos, and wishes he was from Germany. And today he's going to talk to us about how he's able to create a career out of his love for the outdoors. So welcome, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome, Jake. We're starting our famous 7-minute timer. And so tell us about what you do and what your job is and where you work.
Well, I work at Conrad Kohrs Ranch National Historic Site, which is in a very small town in the middle of Montana called Deer Lodge. So we live in between Glacier National Park and Yellowstone. And my job is the administrative support assistant for the whole park, which means that primarily I deal with a lot of the admin responsibilities. So like for hiring, I'm basically HR. I work a lot with dealing with bills that come in. If people need to make purchases for anything like that in the park, I help a lot with that. But then 20% of my job is also delegated to helping everybody else on the ranch. So being the assistant for the ranch, I get to go and help with the cattle. I go help with like vaccines and whenever they need to be branded and stuff like that, I help them with that. Or if they need help with the horses, I can do horses. I go help interpretation sometimes, which is really where you see a lot of the park rangers that you meet and stuff like that. They're the ones that you'll see talking to visitors and getting programs and things like that. So there's the ones that you primarily deal with. I'm usually in the back office hiding away from everybody else. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting job position. Not a whole lot of people in the Park Service have a job like this where they go to work every day and they do paperwork, and then you're like, I think I'll go out and work with the horses or the cattle. So Conrad Kohrs Ranch is one of those few places that actually has a working cattle ranch. It's not the only one, but there are a few other ones. I think LBJ in Texas is one. But yeah, my job kind of flops around. I do a whole lot of different stuff. I'm not just I'm not a one-trick pony.
Doesn't sound like it, Jake. So out of all of those things, can you tell us one of your favorite things about your job, or maybe one of the unusual things you've done on the job?
I think one of the most unusual things I've done on the job is I came into work, and this was during the winter time. I think it was probably January or February. It's blistering cold outside. I don't know how, it's probably closer to like 15, 20 degrees outside, but we have to put all the cattle through a chute so that they can get a pregnancy checked. Maybe this was earlier on in the season, or maybe it was November or December, something like that. Maybe not as cold, but we had to get all of the cattle pregnancy checked, which means that I know a fellow with a shoulder sleeve long plastic glove has to check cattle. And I think I came into work that day and I was doing trainings for one thing or the other. I was probably working on something. And then my boss came out and said, come on, we got to go work with the cattle. And I said, okay, I'm not going to complain. I'll go with you. So I go out there with him and he says, all right, you're in charge of the squeeze chute, which is this weird, it's kind of like a semicircle, and you push all these cattle into the squeeze and then they get forced into the channel. And then that's where they go down and get locked into a thing where they can get pregnancy checked. So that was probably a big switch from, I was probably doing some kind of training, clerical training or something like that. And I'm like, all right, come on, we got to go do dirty stuff. So it was a pretty big shift.
Wow.
Yeah, that is.
Right. About some of the people you meet, do you have any stories about anyone that you've met, that's a visitor or another employee coworker? A funny story, interesting.
Oh my gosh, you meet a lot of interesting people in the Park Service. Every single person has some kind of story, some kind of crazy story that they've seen or they've done. One of the parks that I worked previously at was called Hovenweep National Monument. And we had a couple of guys who were, I guess, trumping around at the bottom of the canyon. And this is an ancestral Puebloan site. So it's like thousands and thousands of years old. So I called the local law enforcement guy who works for the Bureau of Land Management. And he comes out and he says, all right, come down into the valley with me. And it was almost dark, but I trumped around in the valley in the canyon basin. We were looking like for footprints and stuff. It was just, I don't know. It's one of those things that's just wildly, like, I was just interpretation. I was just an intern at the time. I wasn't even a park ranger at that moment. And then this law enforcement guy is like, come on, we're going to go look for footprints. And I'm like, I don't know the first thing about crime scene investigation, but I can pretty much tell you it's probably not this. Probably not the best idea. But you meet all kinds of people in the Park Service. You meet all kinds, I mean, a majority of the people you meet, especially visitors coming in to visit your park, are just genuinely super nice people, like the most enjoyable people you can be around. You know, they're very curious, they want to know more, and that's why I love the interpretation side of it, is because they want to know what you're talking about. They want to know what's going on.
Right.
And then sometimes you do get some interesting folks. I think one of the more recent ones, and this one's just kind of funny, but the ranch that I work at here has Grant in the name. And a fella and his wife decided they would stop off, and I guess they were traveling in a Corvette, as you do, and they decided to stop off, and they pulled up to the visitor center. They walked up there and they said, "So where's Grant?" And as the story goes, he moved back up to Canada. So I looked at him and said, "Well, he's probably buried in Manitoba, Canada somewhere." And he gives me this weird look, like, "Ulysses S. Grant?" And I couldn't help myself. I just looked at him and said, "No." Like, he didn't know the story or anything like that, but that's you know, I offered him, I was like, well, no, it's Ulysses S. Grant was not here at all, as far as I know. But I'm more than willing to tell you about the ranch and its history. You know, it probably dates back to pretty close to the same time period, if you want to learn more. And I had a brochure in hand. It was just like, no, thanks, we're good. And then they hopped back in the car and left. I said, okay.
Okay.
As you
Not
want.
the Grant they were looking for, right?
No.
I guess.
That's awesome. People are hilarious. So
They're very fun.
You said it's a small town in Montana. What else is there to do and see in that area if somebody were to come out and visit there?
Well, I mean, we're only 3.5 hours away from two of the largest national parks in the United States. So definitely go and visit Glacier. It's only like 3.5, 4 hours away to the north of us, and Yellowstone's only about 3.5, 4 hours away to the south of us. So those are two big places to go and visit. Here in town specifically, they've got this is going to sound hilarious. It's a very old prison. It's one of the oldest prisons in Montana. Cool. It was built in the late 1800s. And they've kind of turned it into a big touristy thing. They've got, 7 different kinds of museums. There's a car museum there.
Wow.
They've got, I don't know how many cars, hundreds and hundreds of cars, ranging all the way back from, the late 1800s all the way up until, today.
There's our 7-minute timer. All right, we're not even close to done asking all the questions we had for you, Jane.
Get all the stuff.
Beautiful stories. You've now made me want to go visit, and also
it sounds fascinating.
Need to have a job with parks, because sounds exciting and fun and never a dull moment, right?
Oh no! Yeah, every day is something new.
Great.
So what would you tell someone really quick who wants to work for the Park Service? Is there a way to get into these types of jobs?
Oh yeah. Yeah, one of the things I would recommend is, if you don't have a bachelor's degree, you don't actually need a bachelor's degree to get into the Park Service. So what you can do as somebody who wants to get into the Park Service is, number one, you have to be incredibly determined. You have to really want it. You have to do this. It's got to be one of those things you just want to do really bad. And then what you do is you also get into contact with something called the Student Conservation Association. This is for folks who don't have a degree. But if you can't get into the Park Service even with a degree, you can look through this student conservation as well. That's how I got into the Park Service, actually. I spent a whole year as an intern at Hovenweep National Monument, and it was amazing. I had an awesome time as an intern. They give you a stipend it's usually for groceries. Your housing is free, so you don't have to worry too much about, as long as you don't have like debts to pay off. I mean, I can only say so much, but yeah. That would be the first thing I got to say, is be determined and look up the Student Conservation Association.
That's a great tip. That's fantastic, because it's what an interesting job. That's absolutely. All right. Well, April looks like she's disconnected a little. I'm going to go ahead and I don't see it. So anyway, thanks for taking your time, Jake. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful hearing your stories and sharing some of the information that we had. So we have a question and answer series that we're doing new. So if you want to ask April and I some questions, you can go ahead and do that. There's a link in the description, and continue to travel with us through real stories from real people. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks for having me.